Can you believe the nerve of some people? Picture this. A massive motorcycle screeches to a halt right in front of a quaint little diner, its engine roaring like a beast unleashed. A burly biker storms through the door, kicking chairs aside as if they're mere toys, and bellows, "I hate these old guys showing off in military gear." Before anyone can blink, his fist crashes into the face of an 85-year-old veteran. Can you imagine the shock? The entire diner freezes, the air thick with disbelief. Who would dare strike a man who's given so much for his country? But hold on, because 30 minutes later, a convoy of armored military vehicles rolls up outside, their engines humming with purpose. Who called them? Why are they here? Oh, this story is about to take your breath away. We're going to dive into acts of compassion that brighten the darkest days. So, what really happened? And if you think stories like this, raw, real, and powerful, deserve to continue, share your perspective and hit that subscribe button now to help us spread the word. Every morning at precisely 7:30, Carl Wilson set out on his quiet pilgrimage, 3 blocks from his modest apartment to Annie's diner. At 85, his steps were slower now, each one a reminder of the military days long behind him, but his resolve? Unbreakable. He never missed a single day. The waitresses greeted him like family, their voices warm with familiarity, and the regular customers tipped their hats in quiet respect. "Morning, Mr. Wilson." Annie, the diner's heart and soul, called out, pouring his usual black coffee with a grin that could melt the frostiest morning. "How's the knee today?" Still attached, Carl quipped, his gentle smile lighting up his weathered face as he adjusted his veteran's cap. That faded blue cap, emblazoned with a Korean War service emblem, had seen better days, threadbare and worn, but to Carl, it was a crown, a badge of honor he wore with quiet pride. Before he even settled into his booth, Carl did what he always did, grabbed a clean rag and started wiping down the empty tables. Annie had begged him to stop time and again. "You're a customer, Carl, not staff," she'd protest, hands on her hips. But Carl would just chuckle, "Old habits, Annie. The military teaches you to keep things tidy." It wasn't just a chore to him, it was a piece of who he was, a small way to serve even now. This Thursday morning, the diner buzzed with life. A young family filled the corner booth with laughter, their 2 kids giggling over pancakes dripping with syrup. Office workers hunched over laptops at another table, their coffee mugs steaming as they typed away. But then, bam, the door flew open, a gust of cold air sweeping in like an uninvited guest. 4 men in leather jackets swaggered inside, and the room shifted. These weren't your everyday folks. Tattoos coiled up their arms like serpents, and their voices boomed across the small space as they claimed a table, knocking a chair to the floor without a care. The diner's cozy warmth vanished, replaced by a chill of unease. "Hey, Grandpa," the biggest biker sneered, his eyes zeroing in on Carl's veteran's cap. "Playing dress-up today?" Carl didn't bite, he just sipped his coffee, steady as ever. He'd faced disrespect before, and he knew how to weather it. But this guy wouldn't let it go. "I'm talking to you, old man. That hat, you probably bought it at a gift shop, right?" The taunt hung heavy in the air. Customers shifted uncomfortably, stealing glances. Annie edged toward the counter phone, her hand trembling slightly. "Actually," Carl said, his voice soft but firm, "I earned it." That's when it all erupted. The biker shot up, towering over Carl's table like a storm cloud ready to burst. "You know what I think of you military types," he spat, his words dripping with venom. "Always wanting special treatment, discounts, thanking for your service." Carl started to reply, "I never asked for," but, wham, the fist flew out of nowhere. It smashed into Carl's jaw with a sickening crack that stopped the diner dead. The old man toppled backward, his frail frame hitting the floor, his precious cap skittering away. Blood trickled from his lip, pooling on the freshly mopped tiles. "That's what I think of your service," the biker snarled, sauntering back to his cackling crew as if he'd won some twisted prize. Carl's shaky hand reached for his fallen cap, his eyes, not blazing with anger, but shadowed with something deeper, something heart-wrenching, disappointment. Hadn't he given enough? Annie rushed over, napkins clutched tight, but her gaze flicked nervously to the biker's table. She couldn't afford trouble, not after last month, when a nearby restaurant had its windows smashed by the same gang. "I'm calling the police," she whispered, helping Carl up. "No," he said, his voice steady despite the pain, taking the napkins. "Don't." The diner fell into a suffocating silence. The family in the corner booth went still, the father pulling his kids close, avoiding everyone's eyes. The office workers buried themselves in their screens, pretending nothing had happened. Who'd want to be next? But Carl, he rose, blood staining his shirt, and shuffled back to his seat, his dignity shining brighter than ever. No rage, no threats. Instead, he tenderly cleaned his cap, wiping his own blood from the emblem with fingers that trembled from age, not fear. "Sir, are you okay?" A small voice cut through the hush. A boy, maybe 10, had slipped free from his father's grip and stood by Carl's table, his wide eyes brimming with worry. His phone peeked from his pocket, he'd caught the whole thing on video. "Just fine, son," Carl said, forcing a smile through swollen lips. "This old body's taken worse hits." The boy's dad yanked him back, muttering apologies into the void, but that child's courage lingered like a spark. Across the room, a stranger in a sharp business suit locked eyes with Carl. "Do you have any family, sir?" he asked, his tone gentle but curious. Carl nodded faintly. "My son. Military too, special operations. Stationed far away now." "Far away where?" the man pressed. "About 40 miles from here, actually," Carl said, pride flickering in his voice. "But he's busy. Important work." The bikers kept up their racket, tossing smirks Carl's way. One mocked him, trembling like an old man, sparking roars of laughter from the others. Carl didn't flinch. He laid $3 by his untouched coffee, stood with all the strength his 85 years could muster, and headed for the door. "Running home to cry?" a biker jeered. Carl didn't look back. He set his cleaned cap on his head and stepped out, his posture ramrod straight, military through and through. The second the door swung shut, the suited stranger bolted outside, phone in hand. He scrolled to "James Wilson, Colonel," hesitated for a heartbeat, should he do this, then hit call. "You won't believe what just happened to your father," he said, voice hushed but urgent. "No, he's alive, but you need to know this." 30 minutes later, the ground rumbled. "Can you feel it?" Heads whipped toward the windows as 4 black Humvees and a transport truck rolled in, blocking every exit. No civilian plates, just stark military numbers. "What the hell?" a biker muttered, his mug clattering down. Soldiers in tactical gear spilled out, moving with chilling precision, no chaos, just quiet power. The diner held its breath as the door opened again. A tall man in a dress uniform strode in, flanked by 8 soldiers in black. His chest glittered with medals, combat, valor, rank, undeniable even to a civilian's eye. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel James Wilson," he declared, his voice slicing the silence. His gaze swept the room, landing on the biker's table like a laser. The suited stranger gave a subtle nod from his corner. 30 minutes ago, my father was assaulted here." The lead biker's bravado melted, his face paling. "My father, who survived 3 tours in Korea. My father, with 2 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star. My father, who at 85 stands straighter than any of you." The colonel's calm was terrifying. "My father, who never once used his service to demand anything." The biker who'd struck Carl squirmed. "Look, man, we didn't know what?" James cut in. "That he's a person. That he deserves respect. Or that he's tied to someone who could end your little game." Annie stepped up, voice shaky. "Sir, I was going to call the police, but he stopped me." "Of course he did," James said, softening. "That's my dad, always shielding others. The door creaked open again, and there stood Carl, his bruised face etched with confusion. "James, what are you doing here?" The room watched as this towering officer melted into a sun. "Dad," he said, hugging Carl gently. Outside, the soldiers formed a line, saluting as Carl stepped forward. "These men volunteered to come when they heard, Dad," James said. "The grandson of a man you saved in Incheon in '51. He's under my command." The lead biker rose, his swagger gone. "Sir," he said to Carl, "I didn't know who you were." James stepped in. "That's your mistake. It shouldn't matter who he is, he's a veteran, an elder. That's enough." The diner erupted in applause, customers finally finding their courage, clapping for the man in the faded cap. Carl raised a hand, hushing them. "No need for this," he said softly. He faced the biker who'd hit him, now a shadow of his former self. "I forgive you," Carl said. "But remember, don't judge worth by age or looks. The quietest souls carry the loudest stories." The biker offered a shaky hand. "I'm truly sorry, sir." As Carl turned to leave with James, the boy with the phone ran up. "Sir, you dropped this." He held out a tiny pin from Carl's cap, his unit insignia. "Thank you, young man," Carl said, his smile warm. "This means more than you know." A young soldier saluted him at the door. "Sir, it's an honor. My granddad told me about your unit. Today, I saw real honor." Carl returned the salute, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Honor's not about who's watching, son. It's what you do when you think no one is." As Carl and James walked out, the diner felt the echo of a lesson. Some blows hit the face, but the strongest ones reveal the soul. And the greatest power? It's not in fighting back, it's in showing others how to rise. Inside, the diner tried desperately to shake off the heavy cloak of tension that had settled over it, but oh, how the air buzzed with unspoken words and suppressed outrage. Annie, her hands trembling with a mixture of fear and fury, knelt to wipe away the crimson stain of Carl's blood from the cracked linoleum floor, a brutal, vivid reminder of the violence that had just erupted in this quiet little haven. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? Customers, their faces etched with guilt and unease, returned to their conversations, their voices dropping to hushed whispers as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace that hung by a thread. But the bikers, oh, those bikers, they reveled in their cruelty, ordering more food with voices that boomed like thunder, their harsh laughter cutting through the stillness, a stark and sickening contrast to the quiet dignity of the man they just assaulted. No one dared to stand up. No one dared to speak out. The injustice clung to the air, thick and suffocating, like a bad smell that everyone pretended not to notice. An old man who had once bled for the very flag that symbolized freedom, today bleeding again, right in front of an entire community. And yet, nobody stood up. How could they just sit there? Doesn't that twist your heart with anger? If this stirs something deep within you, if you feel the unbearable weight of this wrong, type unfair, because silence in the face of such blatant disrespect is nothing short of a betrayal of everything that flag stands for. Exactly 30 minutes after Carl had limped away, bruised and battered, the ground beneath the diner began to tremble, a low, ominous rumble that sent shivers racing down every spine in the room. Heads snapped toward the windows, eyes widening in sheer disbelief as four sleek, black military Humvees and a hulking transport truck roared into the parking lot, their tires crunching gravel as they blocked every single exit. Their engines growled with a quiet menace, and these weren't just any vehicles, no, sir. They bore no civilian markings, only stark, cryptic military identification numbers that screamed authority and power. "What the hell?" one of the bikers muttered, his bravado crumbling like dry leaves as he set down his coffee mug with a clatter that echoed in the stunned silence. The diner's chatter died instantly, swallowed by a suffocating hush that pressed against every chest. Who were these men rolling in like a storm? And why, oh, why, were they here? From the vehicles emerged men in sleek tactical gear, moving with a precision that could only be forged in the fires of discipline and training. They glided like shadows, silent and swift, their every step calculated, no rushing, no shouting, just a calm, terrifying efficiency that made the air crackle with electricity. The diner fell into a hush so deep you could hear the faint drip of coffee from the pot behind the counter. Then, the door swung open with a slow, deliberate creak, and in strode a tall man in a crisp dress uniform, his presence filling the room like a tidal wave. Behind him, 8 soldiers in black tactical gear fanned out, their eyes sharp and unyielding, their movements a silent promise of order. The decorations on his chest, medals that gleamed like stars in the dim light, told a story of battles fought, lives saved, and victories hard won, a testament to a life of service that even the most oblivious civilian couldn't ignore. Who was this man? This was no ordinary soul, this was a force of nature, a reckoning walking among them. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel James Wilson," he declared, his voice a blade of steel slicing through the thick tension, crisp and commanding. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, swept the room with methodical precision, locking onto the biker's table like a predator spotting prey. Without so much as glancing at a scrap of paper, he strode toward them, each step deliberate, each movement radiating an authority that made the air hum. From his corner, the business-suited man, who had quietly slipped away to make the call that summoned this storm, gave a nearly imperceptible nod, his role in this unfolding drama now crystal clear. The bikers shrank under that gaze, their earlier arrogance wilting like flowers in a frost. 30 minutes ago, the colonel continued, his words slow and deliberate, each one landing like a thunderbolt, my father was assaulted in this very establishment. The lead biker's face went ashen, the blood draining from his cheeks as the gravity of his actions crashed over him like a wave. My father, James pressed on, his voice steady but laced with a quiet, simmering fury, who survived 3 grueling tours in Korea. My father, who bears 2 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star, medals earned through blood, sweat, and unimaginable sacrifice. My father, who, at 85, still stands with a dignity and strength that puts every single one of you to shame. The colonel's calm was unnerving, a storm brewing just beneath the surface, ready to break. And yet, my father, who has never once in his entire life used his service to demand anything from anyone, was treated like dirt under your boots. Can you feel the outrage in those words? Doesn't it make your blood boil? The biker who had dared to throw the punch fidgeted in his seat, his earlier swagger evaporating like mist in the morning sun. Look, man, we didn't know, he stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of his own guilt. Didn't know what? James snapped, his eyes blazing with a fire that could melt steel. That he's a human being who deserves the basic decency you'd afford any stranger on the street? Or that he's connected to someone who could make you pay dearly for your arrogance? The question hung in the air, sharp and accusing, a challenge that left the biker speechless and small. Annie, her hands wringing a dish towel until her knuckles turned white, stepped forward, her voice trembling with nerves and a hint of defiance. Sir, I was about to call the police, but he told me not to. Of course he did, James said, his tone softening for the first time, a flicker of pride and sorrow dancing in his eyes. That's my father. Always thinking of others, always shielding them, even when he's the one bleeding and broken. Isn't that just heartbreakingly noble? The door creaked open once more, and there stood Carl himself, his face a map of confusion and bruises, each mark a testament to the brutality he'd endured. James, what on earth are you doing here? He asked, his voice a mix of surprise and weary concern. The entire diner held its breath as this formidable officer, this man who had commanded the room with such unshakable authority, softened in an instant. Dad, he whispered, crossing the floor in 3 long strides and enveloping the old man in a careful, tender embrace that spoke volumes, a son protecting his father, just as his father had once protected a nation. Oh, what a sight that was! Could you feel the love in that moment? Outside, the soldiers had formed a line of honor, their postures rigid with a respect that radiated through the glass. As Carl stepped forward, they raised their hands in a salute so synchronized it was as if they shared a single heartbeat, a tribute to a hero they'd never met but whose legacy they felt. These men, James said, his voice thick with emotion, turning to the silent room, volunteered to come the moment they heard what happened, Dad. And you know why? Because the man you saved in Incheon back in '51, his grandson serves under me. Your courage, your selflessness, it lives on in them, in us. Doesn't that just give you chills? The lead biker rose, his once proud shoulders slumped in defeat, his arrogance shattered like glass on concrete. Sir, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, addressing Carl directly, I didn't know who you were. But before Carl could respond, James stepped forward, his protective instincts flaring like a lion guarding its cub. That's your mistake right there, he said, his tone icy and unyielding. It shouldn't matter who he is. He's a veteran. He's an elder. That alone should have commanded your respect. Isn't that the truth we all need to hear? And then, something beautiful happened. Oh, how it lifted the soul. Around the diner, customers who had been paralyzed by fear during the assault suddenly found their courage, their voices. A single clap broke the silence, then another, and soon the entire room erupted, every soul except the bikers leaping to their feet, applauding the old man in the faded cap with a fervor that shook the walls. It was as if the diner itself was exhaling, releasing the tension and replacing it with a tidal wave of admiration and respect. Can you picture that roar of gratitude? Carl, ever humble, raised a weathered hand, and the applause faded like a tide receding. There's no need for all this, he said, his voice gentle but firm, carrying the weight of a life well lived. He turned to the biker who had struck him, the man now diminished, almost childlike in his shame. I forgive you, Carl said simply, his words a balm to the room's wounds, a gift of grace that stunned everyone. But take this with you, never judge someone's worth by their age or what they wear. The quietest people often carry the loudest, most powerful stories. Oh, what wisdom in those words! Don't they just resonate deep in your core? The biker, his bravado utterly broken, extended a hand that shook with the weight of his regret. I'm truly sorry, sir, he said, his voice cracking with a sincerity that hadn't existed an hour before. It was a small gesture, but oh, how it spoke volumes. As Carl turned to leave with James, a small figure darted forward, the boy who had bravely recorded the incident, his eyes wide with awe. Sir, you dropped this earlier, he said, holding out a tiny metal pin that had fallen from Carl's cap, his unit insignia, a symbol of a life of service. Thank you, young man, Carl said, his smile warm and genuine as he took the pin, cradling it like a treasure. This means more to me than you could ever know. Can't you just feel the tenderness in that exchange? Before Carl could reach the door, a young soldier stepped forward, his posture impeccable as he snapped a crisp salute that rang with reverence. Sir, it's an honor to meet you, he said, his voice trembling with admiration. My grandfather told me stories about your unit, stories of bravery and sacrifice that I'll never forget. But today, I learned what real honor looks like, watching you. Doesn't that just swell your heart with pride? Carl returned the salute with the same precision he'd learned decades ago, then rested a weathered hand on the young soldier's shoulder, his eyes twinkling with the wisdom of 85 years. Honor, son, isn't about who's watching, he said, his voice steady and sure. It's about what you do when you think no one's looking. That's when your true character shines. Oh, what a lesson. Isn't that something we could all stand to live by? As Carl and James walked out, the diner remained hushed, every eye following them with a newfound respect that seemed to glow in the dim light. The air was thick with a lesson that would linger long after the Humvee's engines faded into the distance. Some punches may strike the face, but the strongest blows reveal the heart. And sometimes, oh, sometimes, the greatest strength isn't in swinging back, but in showing others how to stand tall, with dignity and grace that can move mountains. If you believe that those who have served, like Carl, deserve to be honored and defended to the very end, subscribe to the channel and you'll never miss another story of courage, respect, and the quiet, unshakable power of true honor. Isn't that a legacy worth celebrating?